Thank you for having me on this extraordinary conference. My name is Daan Weggemans. I'm a researcher at the Leiden University, and I'm today here to speak a bit about the ideas and insights I gained on the families of terrorists. And I would like to be more than just an intermezzo, to more be than a break during this conference in which you can get coffee or listen to my story. I like this to be a call for cooperation, for reflection on our own work, and for innovation in dealing with problems which we might never have encountered before, which urge us to rethink what we do and how we act. And for that call, I'd like to discuss this idea of foreign fighters and their families. And before I start the theoretical reflection, I am an academic, I'd like to start with two stories. The first story is about a girl called Carlijn. And Carlijn grew up in a small town in the middle of the Netherlands, and she has never been a perfect student and a perfect daughter. She has been a troublemaker in school, and at some point she made new friends which didn't have a particular well influence on her either. Her parents started worrying, and at some point they did not know what to do with her, but in the end she also was a teenager, so maybe this was just part of her story. Someday she converted to Islam and she started to get more serious with religion. She started to reading books and made new friends of which her parents did not particularly know as well who they were. The story continues a couple of months, and after a year her mother gets a phone call from the dentist. Carlijn didn't show up, and it was about the same time her brother also received a text message of one of her favorite friends, her best friends. Where was Carlijn? She isn't responding to my text messages. He recalls also her dad telling him, I had such a strange text message last night of Carlijn in which she said she really loves me and that she would never forget me. The mother, when she heard this story, she realized that something must be wrong. This didn't feel well. She had this strange gut feeling. They ran home and on her bed they found a goodbye letter which read, when you read this, I'll probably be far, far away. Carlijn had decided to travel to Syria and married a guy over there. I want to share a second story, which is the story of Nora. Nora is the sister of Nadia. She's the youngest sister in the family. It is a Moroccan-Dutch family, and this family is a real liberal family. Religion plays a role, but not a very active one, and the daughters are allowed to choose their own way of living, whether or not they want to wear a headscarf and that kind of things. At some point in time, Nora decides that she wants to be stricter in dealing with religion. She starts reading more books, is going to eat stricter, she doesn't want to listen to music anymore. And while her parents, especially her father, worries, because this is not how he intended to raise his girl, her sister still has a very close connection. They are actually best friends. They keep in contact, they talk a lot. And Nadia, her sister, she doesn't really worry. At some point, however, strange things start to happen. New friends which they don't know, and also new people start showing up their door, and Nora also starts chatting to people in Syria. However, she specifically hides this from her family and her friends. One day, Nora's calling her sister to ask where her passport is. She needs the passport for something at school, she says. And Nadia, the sister, says, well, it's probably there. The parents are on holiday, so they couldn't help her, and they helped her find her, or she helped her find her passport. Unfortunately, the passport was used to travel to Syria, where she now still is. These stories are about people radicalizing, before the eyes of their loved ones, and it raises a lot of questions. It has been maybe the topic many of you have been working on or have been interested in because they followed it in the news media. It has certainly been one of my topics of research. Why do people radicalize, but also how can you spot radicalization? How can we signal when somebody radicalizes, when somebody has a plan to commit a terrorist attack or to travel to Syria or Iraq to join ISIS in the past? What can we do about it? How do interventions work? These kind of questions are, as I would argue, not the questions of one individual, of one family member, but in the end I'll argue it is a question which we all should ask us and those who are all involved in working and dealing with security, because we all have one piece of the puzzle in trying to preventing it. Let me quickly go over the basics of radicalization and de-radicalization. Radicalization processes such as the one of Carlijn, but also of Nora, they consist of multiple dimensions or layers. One layer, of course, is the ideological layer, where people are getting interested in religion or start asking ideological questions, which can be on right-wing extremism, it can be on jihadism of all sorts. This ideology helps them answering basic questions. Who am I? What should I do? What is my task? In any radicalization process, of course, ideology plays an important role. There are also many practical aspects to radicalization and joining terrorist groups. Many seek thrill or adventure. Others try to look for protection, or it's a financial attractive career in certain countries. So every radicalization process often has ideological components, but also practical components. I want to focus today on the social layer of a radicalization process. The family members, the wish of belonging to a strong social group, but also the people they already know in religious or in radical movements. For example, family members. And the question is, what can family members do and see when dealing with radicalization? That's going to be my main focus during this short keynote. If you look at the family and the roles family members can play during this process of radicalization, I think we can distill three different roles. On the one end of the spectrum, you have an encouraging role in which family members support this process of radicalization or leave for Syria or joining of a terrorist group. On the other end of the spectrum, there is this more restraining role in which family members try to prevent radicalization. In all sorts of ways. And in the middle ground, you'll find this more latent role in which people do not directly have an active influence, which is clearly visible on the individual that's radicalizing. These roles, of course, over time, they can change, they can be dynamic, and they can be more direct or indirect. But in short, you can look at family members and even at other people in the social environment of terrorists having one of these three roles. The role, especially when we speak about family members, which is most often in the public eye, is this encouraging role. Family members who try to support people who want to join a terrorist organization. For example, you read in the newspaper about this idea of intergenerational transmission of beliefs or ideals. Parents raising their kids in a certain way in which they raise them to become a terrorist and the beliefs that belong with them. There's also the giving of emotional support, for example, in this case of foreign fighters. Parents telling or family members saying that they're proud of their son or daughter or brother or sister. This encouraging role can also take the form of more practical support, right? The financing, for example, as we've seen in various court cases of foreign fighters, is an example of that. We also see something that's more in the opposite direction, not that family members themselves, parents, brothers, sisters, influence and try to radicalize their beloved one, but that actually the terrorist, him or herself, tries to recruit someone from their family. An example is what I wrote down from one of our researchers, is Afka, who said, it's a mother of a woman who joined ISIS, who says, her husband tried to convert me as well. They've often asked me to travel to Syria too. Here you can help us too, and we can find you a good husband, she said. When dealing with radicalization, this is often overlooked, but it's important for us to remember that these kind of relationship and forms of influence are still very relevant and for us to keep an eye on. So even when somebody radicalized or became a terrorist, it's still important also to monitor and track the family to help them. The other side of the spectrum is a more restraining role. As I already explained, here the family is more a positive influence. Parents who, for example, who suspected that their kid was radicalizing, and we've seen some examples of that in the past too, they went to the authorities, asked for help. They hide their passports so that their kids couldn't leave. And they asked for help, for example, in dealing with particular aspects of radicalization. The municipality, or they went to the police in order to actually prevent that their kid would go and become a terrorist. Something else these family members can do is going into a normative discussion about right and wrong, about what families think what is the right thing to do. These discussions with radicalizing individuals, of course, are very precarious and difficult to have because most of the time they're not open to this kind of discussion, and especially not by family members. But some, as I also quote on the bottom of the slide, have been rather successful, if not directly, then indirectly. For example, Wouter, the dad of Sanne, he said, Sanne said about this, we had talks about which Sanne later said, after she returned from Syria, those were the moments, Dad, that you really made me think. So even though that in sometimes these discussions, they do not seem very fruitful, it might leave something, it might stick, and it might change something in the long run. But in the end, it's also very difficult, and often things go wrong. We also see that people, family members, can practically support, for example, during the reintegration of foreign fighters, their family members, and prevent that they'll fall back or relapse or end up in a terrorist organization for the second time. They can be a buffer against recidivism. And I think that that's a relevant part they can play. We've seen that in various forms. For example, they can help finding a job, but also take them into their house and monitor their kids and make sure that they won't relapse. However, both roles, which are often emphasized both in media, in policy papers, and by policymakers, they're very clear roles, but in practice, most of the time, most cases, there's this latent role in which families are more a neutral factor or are not of a direct influence. The influence of family members in this case is more absent or more hidden. And one explanation for that can be is that there's this physical or emotional distance. While family members might like to change or influence their children or their brothers or sisters, reality is that many of the radicalizing youth doesn't live with their parents anymore. So you only have a small time or part of the time to actually you can see what's going on. Or the radicalization plays out online. These things are very difficult to monitor. Sometimes there's also this emotional distance. Parents, like I am, are occupied with all sorts of stuff. It can be our own personal life, it can be disease, it can be substance abuse, there are divorces, there are all kinds of reasons why people might be distracted and not be able to intervene as they would like to have. A last very important reason why people might not be able to influence or stop or prevent their family member from radicalizing is the lack of knowledge. Many people only have limited knowledge of radicalization, of foreign fighters, of terrorism, and all these kind of things. And that makes it very difficult for them to actually spot radicalization if you don't know how it works, or if you don't recognize when things are about to go wrong. So these are all examples why these family members can't play often the role we would like them to. As the example also the mother of Tara, Afke, gives, I thought Tara would always does these strange things. And then I tried to get her out of trouble. This was such a phase again, I thought. She was trying to get her driver's license, and she got it just before she left. And I thought, well, she wouldn't be doing all those things when she's actually planning to leave for Syria. It came as a surprise because the signs weren't recognized, or because they were significantly hidden by the spouse from their parents. Two other examples, Nadia said about her sister Dania, we feel that Dania left very suddenly. My sister was an actress. She led this double life and we did not know. Here again, it is it's secretly hidden, the life of radicalization. Francine said about her daughter Mirna, you never know what's going on in someone's head. My daughter told me that she would never deceive me, and I believed her. I've always been there for her. I could have never imagined that she would do something like this. We thought that she was doing well, being married and having a house. We did not see this coming at all. There are certain obstacles when we think about the potential of a positive family role. For example, the main thing is that doing something against radicalization, or trying to prevent it, or trying to rehabilitate someone, it doesn't work, just like with regular criminals. When there's no cognitive opening, if somebody doesn't want to change, or if doesn't want to be stopped, it's very difficult to actually do something against it. One thing that's related to the previous slides is families can only see so much when their son or daughter doesn't live in the house anymore, but also when things are secretly hidden from them by their family members. It's impossible to see everything a loved one does, and very much I do not want to do it anyway. The idea of limited knowledge and expertise, I've already touched upon that, but also love sometimes makes blind, right? We sometimes just cannot imagine that our son or daughter would like to join ISIS. And therefore, people, even when there are signs, they ignore them because they really can't imagine that that would be their kid. And very often there's this broader problematic family situation. People who are seriously ill in the family, people who are in a divorce, who are being misused. All these kind of reasons might prevent people from actually seeing what's going on. Which brings me to us. Academics, professionals, policymakers, what can we do? Well, surely not everything. There are many things we can't do, and I think that working in security in general, but also in this case, starts with acknowledging the fact that we can't see anything or everything, and that some things will be missed, and that when dealing with with topics such as security, sometimes we need to accept that there will always be a risk. It's an inconvenient truth, but it is a truth, and it goes for dealing with terrorists, but also with all other kinds of security issues. In the end, we need to minimize the risk, but there will probably always be a risk, especially when dealing with people who are unpredictable in the first place. We can also provide insights and contacts to the people who are actually dealing with this problem. And of course, again, this you can make much broader than just the idea of radicalization. We can train people, we can teach them about the phenomenon that's going on, and introduce them to the right people. Sometimes, in cases there is more to be done, we can provide, in this case, foreign fighters and their families with more social psychological help or practical support when needed. stimulating that families get socially embedded, that the right people are there to monitor them, to prevent that other family members might radicalize, to police if necessary, but also to make sure there's an alternative to radicalization for those and help when needed. One very important thing, and I think that it also goes for a broader context, is we should always be aware of the treatment of family members in policy and in practice. Very often, as research shows, family members are victims too, and that goes for criminals, but also in this case for the family members of terrorists. They did not often ask for this, most of them did not stimulate the whole process of radicalization, and therefore if you need their help or if you'd like to get more insights or information or intelligence, then dealing in the right way with them, treating them properly is one of the most important things we can do. Sometimes, of course, we can do nothing. Doing everything or everyone doing something can have the opposite effect of what we actually want to. Doing nothing for one organization might be a very valuable alternative when another organization is actually dealing with it. Sometimes you can't just access the families you'd like, and the only organization that can actually deal with it are intelligence agencies or police services. And we could educate ourselves. We could go to conferences like this one, virtually or practically or physically, and learn more about the subject matter. Try and see what the state of the art is. What do we know? What do people do in other countries? And those kind of practices might help us also develop new strategies in the future. To wrap up, I would like to be, as I started, this to be a call for a broader kind of working and dealing with security, because of course I'm speaking about family members, about terrorism, about radicalization, about rehabilitation, but just like these topics are, many other security themes are vastly complex, and there were many great examples on today's conference as well about that, and many of these situations, they call for unique ways of dealing with it. What we see in all these domains, in all kinds of security challenges, is that governance of security has vastly changed. Not only the traditional state is in charge, there are many other kind of private organizations or semi-public organizations involved in dealing with security. Just like there have been national and international organizations. So there has been a shift in governance, both vertically and horizontally, which make dealing with security interesting, but the governance also very difficult. And I think, just like with dealing with terrorism, the answer lies in finding the right partnership and finding the right people to do the right things at the right time. Many people, as I could summarize it, hold a piece of the puzzle. And it's exactly there where we can learn from each other whose turn it is to do the right thing. What we know is that in the end, the answer or the actions of many parties influence the potential actions or the work of others. So what the police will do in the cases of radicalization directly influences the potential actions of youth workers or of family members, and what intelligence agencies will do or private companies will do. It all has an effect on the whole process of rehabilitation or reintegration or the countering of terrorism. Therefore, I'm very happy that I could be here in this empty studio. I would rather have seen you in person, but I think that platforms like these and awards like these are very important for us as a stimuli to connect, to share, and to learn from these kind of complex security issues and how our dealing with security and governance of security has changed. I wish you all the best, and I'm looking forward to meeting you one way or another in the past or in the future. Take care.